Welcome into the video, everybody. If you're clicking on this video, you want a list of the top 15 fantasy football wide receiver tier list, and this is what you're getting. But make sure to go ahead and hit that like button on the video so you can come back to all the other ones. So the number one player on this tier list has to be Justin Jefferson. I mean, there really shouldn't be much of a debate here. He's consistently gotten better every single year, finishing as the wide receiver 11, 4, and then 2 last year, and he has the potential to be the number one this year as well. A lot of people are worried about TJ Hawkinson taking some of the target share, but I really couldn't care less. I mean, in the games that they both played together, he still averaged over 15 fantasy points a game, so that stat alone should just put this argument to rest. But they also lost Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook, so there's still a lot of targets to go around, and if anything, he'll get even more of that target share this year. Now, at number 2 on this tier list, I do have Cooper Kupp, who is a little bit higher than most people's lists, but let me explain why. Now, I do have to say, if Matthew Stafford is still dealing with injury come the NFL season, I might have to move him down a little bit, but assuming him and Kupp are both fully healthy, he is easily my wide receiver 2 here. And I honestly think he's going to finish as a top 3 at least wide receiver very, very easily, and he's falling into the mid-first round of drafts, and I think that's pretty good value. And a lot of people are worried about injury, which is kind of making him falling more than he should be. But when he wasn't injured in the games that he did play last season, he brought in a 31.3% target share, which was easily the most in the NFL. And that's not exactly hard to believe. If you watched any of the Rams games, it felt like every time Matthew Stafford looked up to pass, it was Cooper Kupp getting the ball, and we all know this. So as long as these two can stay healthy, I don't see why that changes. And the Rams, they're going to have to pass the ball a lot if they want to stay close in these games. They aren't favored to win too many games this season. I think they're projected 6 wins on the season. So, I mean, they're going to have to be passing a lot to keep themselves in the game. But my number 3 wide receiver here is Jamar Chase, who has the easiest wide receiver strength of schedule among these 3 top wide receivers. And he is a huge red zone threat. He led the NFL for wide receivers in red zone percentage and targets. I mean, it felt like every time that the Bengals were inside the 15-yard line, he was getting the ball, and that is going to continue. And honestly, if you can get any of these 3 wide receivers in your first round, you are looking very good for the rest of the draft. And the last wide receiver in this S tier here is Tyreek Hill, who has a pretty hard schedule for fantasy football wide receivers, but honestly, that might just make the Dolphins have to pass even more, so it could be a good thing. But let's get into Tyreek Hill. Yes, Tyreek Hill is dealing with some kinds of legal trouble, but I really don't think it's going to suspend him for more than a couple games, if any at all. And if we look at last season, he averaged 100 total yards a game, and he was super effective and felt like he had a bunch of really, really big boom games. And you could also make the case that if Tua were to stay healthy for the entirety of the season, he could easily have finished as the wide receiver 1 on the season, and it kind of looked that way. And Tyreek Hill averaged 20 fantasy points a game when Tua was the starting quarterback, and I feel like as long as Tua can stay healthy, he's going to be able to repeat that season, and he's going at the 8th pick in the middle of the first round, and that's super, super good value for us. But moving down another tier here is Stephon Diggs, who ranks top 10 in pretty much every counting stat for wide receivers. He is a really high floor and is a really consistent player. On top of that, there's really not much target competition on the Bills. I mean, Isaiah McKenzie, maybe Dawson Knox / Dalton Kincaid. I mean, he is the clear wide receiver 1, and on this Josh Allen-led offense, there's a lot of potential there. He's averaged almost 10 targets a game and 85 yards when Josh Allen is throwing him the ball. Again, he's just a super safe wide receiver, and if you don't get any of these top 3, he's a great value to go for right after that. And my number 6 wide receiver here is CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he also has been improving every single year. He was the wide receiver 31 in his rookie year, then his sophomore year he went to the wide receiver 16, and then this past season he was the wide receiver 7, which is pretty big jumps. And he was able to finish as the wide receiver 7 with Dak Prescott missing time, and it's also arguable that if Dak Prescott didn't miss any time, he would have finished a lot higher as well. You could argue that he has a decent amount of target competition with Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup, but I don't see them being more than field openers for this offense, and CeeDee Lamb is going to be the number 1 wide receiver here, and that's not a debate. But again, looking at this trend, it looks like he's going to make another improvement this year, and I do like it in this Cowboys offense. The next wide receiver I have in this tier is AJ Brown, who I'm finding myself to like a lot more because a lot of people are downing him because of all the Devonta Smith hype we are seeing, but I really find myself enjoying him, and I kind of like the late couple rounds of drafts because if you have the 12th pick, you can finish the first round with any version of CD, Stephon Diggs, and then AJ Brown in the next round, and that's a really, really strong wide receiver start there. We know the Eagles team is super offense dominant, and there's going to be no shortage of passes being thrown here. I do think Devonta Smith takes a step forward in efficiency and target requirements, but AJ Brown is still going to be that guy in this offense, and it is a great offensive situation to be in. The next wide receiver on this list that every time I look at him and look more into it, I feel like I need to move him up, but I'm going to keep him at this spot, is Davante Adams, and the only reason I don't put him higher is because of his quarterback situation. It doesn't necessarily appeal me. With that being said, I don't necessarily trust Jimmy G as I would Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers, but Davante Adams is still Davante Adams. He's going to put up numbers either way. It doesn't really matter what quarterback he has, and he's always going to put up fantasy numbers, and it kind of feels disrespectful to be taking him this low. I mean, he finished as the wide receiver 6 last year and the wide receiver 2 before then, but we're drafting him all the way down here at this ADP. And on top of that, if we look at projected yard totals for the entire season, he's only behind Justin Jefferson. All of these other guys are under him. He's going as the wide receiver 8 in the middle of the second round. I mean, I feel like that's a true discount. I would take him every single chance I get here. Moving to the next player on this list is Amon-Ra, and he's just another reason I'm liking these later round picks, because you can leave the draft with Amon-Ra and Stephon Diggs or something. Like, this is really good. And Amon-Ra is another one of those really safe wide receivers. He had a 32% target per route run last season, which is amongst the top wide receivers. It's only behind Tyreek Hill. The Lions also have a very favorable schedule for the wide receiver position. And not to mention, Jameson Williams comes back in week 6, who people on the outside might be saying, well, he's going to take some targets and he's really going to take away from Amon-Ra, but that could not be more wrong. Their play styles are completely different, and what they're asked to do in this offense is working together and not working apart. Jameson Williams is a field stretch guy, and he uses his speed, and he's just going to open up this offense completely for Amon-Ra, and it's going to be a very good fantasy situation for both of them when they come back. The next wide receiver here I have on this list is Garrett Wilson, who again is at a better spot than most people are thinking. He finished as a wide receiver 31 last season, but the only reason he finished so low is because he had to play with Zach Wilson. In the games where he played with him as the starting quarterback and the ones he didn't, there's a massive difference. I'm going to explain that to you guys. But in the 9 games where Zach Wilson was playing, he averaged 4 receptions and just 9 fantasy points a game. And in the 8 games where Zach Wilson wasn't the quarterback, all of that pretty much doubled. He averaged 6 receptions and almost 18 fantasy points per game. And that really just speaks volumes to how bad Zach Wilson was. And now they have Aaron Rodgers, who led Devontae Adams to multiple top 5 wide receiver seasons. And we have to keep in mind that he's still a rookie. He just finished his rookie season going into his sophomore season now, and all of this is only going to improve. Next up on this list, I have Jalen Waddle, who finished as the wide receiver 12 and 13 in his first 2 years in the league. Really strong start for him, and historical data is on his side. Wide receivers in their 3rd and 4th year tend to be breakouts more often, and that's kind of what he's going into. Again though, kind of like Tyreek Hill, I think he's going to need some level of security in making sure that Tua plays the entire season for him to be effective. And Tua's health does affect him more than it does Tyreek Hill, but still, Tua's health does add some level of risk to this pick, so this is why he's lower than the other guys. Jalen Waddle averaged around the same number of receptions with and without Tua, but the efficiency was extremely different. With Tua, he averaged 17 fantasy points on those targets, and without him, it was only 10. This is why I'm taking him under all the rest of these guys. I wouldn't reach on him above the ones I already have ranked, but I mean, he's a very good value, again, if Tua were to stay healthy. But the next wide receiver I have on this list is Chris Olave, and I do like him a lot this year too. I have him a bit higher than most people have him ranked, but we cannot ignore his amazing rookie season that he had with below average quarterback play. If you look at Olave's rookie stats, they were amazing. They pretty much matched up with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Mike Evans and all these other really good rookies. And now he can only build on that with Derek Carr as an upgraded quarterback. He finished last season with a 26% team target share, which means he was pretty much effective from the jump he stepped on the field, which is a really good sign. It is really hard for rookies to get that level of team target share because they slowly get worked into the offense, but just having that and keeping that intensity the entire season is a really good sign. He ranked top 15 in pretty much every wide receiver counting stat imaginable. With an improved offense and quarterback situation, I really do like his value in the 3rd round. Next on this list, I do have T. Higgins, who is another wide receiver. I mean, like Jamar Chase, they're on the same team that have a pretty favorable wide receiver strength of schedule this year. He finished wide receiver 20 last year, but that was kind of hidden. I mean, I'm sure all of us can remember the games that he said he was good to go, played 1 snap, and then sat out the entire game, and he had a couple of those games, and that tanked his wide receiver finish, but he was a lot better behind those games. So hiding behind that wide receiver 20 mark is making him go this late in drafts, but again, he has Joe Burrow at quarterback in an ultra efficient passing offense, and it's safe to say that he's going to be locked into this wide receiver 2 role in the Bengals yet again, and if Jamar Chase were to miss more time like he did last season, instant wide receiver 1. Next up on this list, we're getting to Devonta Smith, who operated as the 1B behind AJ Brown's 1A on the Eagles offense, and down the stretch he really started to make a case to be that 1A. He finished the season running more routes than AJ Brown did last year and jumped from the wide receiver 39 all the way to the wide receiver 14. Now we do have to keep in mind there is still a really big level of target share that needs to be spread around this team, and AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert, DeAndre Swift, all these other guys, and Jalen Hurts taking a vulture number of rushing touchdowns, but I don't knock that he's going to take the step forward to keep being that consistent wide receiver. A close second behind him is Amari Cooper though, who is another one of those more risky wide receivers, but I do want to give him to you guys here. He's pretty good value too. Last season he was getting a lot of wide receiver volume with Deshaun Watson playing. He finished as the wide receiver 17 and had a 26% team target share, which is again pretty high, and Deshaun Watson is only getting better. A narrative that a lot of people don't want to really get behind is that besides his first game back where he was super rusty, he averaged over 17 fantasy points a game and was getting better in every single one of those games. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Lamar Jackson when the season comes, but if he can finish as the wide receiver 17 with Deshaun Watson playing like that, I mean, who knows how high he can go. And we saw last season, even with lackluster play of whatever quarterback he was playing with, he still had a decently high floor. The next wide receiver I do have on this list is Deebo Samuel, who really took a big step back this year. I mean, last year he averaged 110 total yards a game. And if you've made it this far in the video, I really do appreciate you. And if you could drop a like on this video if you haven't already, I would really enjoy that. And I'm sure you guys have gotten a lot of value if you've made it this far. And I'll see you guys in the next video.